I know that the men watching this will roll their eyes at me when I say this, but as a woman, even I am so tired of the male gaze argument, so I can't even imagine how you guys feel.
But imagine how tired we are. Imagine how tired we are of it.
No one can deny that feminism has been essential to us women, gaining the ability to vote, to own land, to having our own right to an education, and so on. Which is why I'm a feminist myself, and I believe that all women should have a right to an education, a right to voice their opinions, a right to vote, to be elected into government positions, etc. Now that one extreme of the political aisle has clicked off the video, let's get rid of the other extreme as well. So while the first and second wave of feminism was invaluable to us women and our standing in society, the movement has forgotten what its purpose is, as it has now gone from asking for equality in the eyes of the law, the government and educational institutions, fighting for women whose governments are oppressing them, fighting for the equal opportunity to prove ourselves and our abilities, to just now demanding not equality, but superiority and preferential treatment in almost every single aspect of life, simply because we're women, villainizing all men while at the same time ignoring women who are facing atrocities and whose basic human rights are being taken away, because they have abandoned real women with real problems in parts of the world where they are not even allowed to speak or have a right to an education, and are instead concerning themselves with whether trans women are real women, whether men can menstruate and get pregnant, and of course with other important issues like how gaming studios are designing the pixelated versions of women in their games.
You serious?
I am going to be splitting this video in essentially two parts. In the first part, we're going to go over how absolutely hypocritical it is to be asking men to remove attractive women from video games, and in the second part, I am going to go over how detrimental this movement has been to both men and women. I know there is no non-controversial way to say this, so let me just begin and get straight into this. My oldest brother got me into gaming when I was still very young, and I have been a gamer ever since. Throughout the years, I have played many games, but RPGs have always been my favorite. This will surprise no woman who has played Mass Effect, but my first ever middle school crush was Commander Shepard. The fact that his looks were based on a model helped, of course, and the fact that he was voiced by Mark Meer was another plus as well. But I digress, because what I'm really trying to say here is that I never got teased or made fun of for liking this fictional character. But as years went by, I started noticing that guys who say they like attractive women in games get much more hate than when we say we like handsome men in games, or when we are outright obsessed with a male fictional character. So we have to be realistic here and say that no woman has gotten the amount of hate that guys get for obsessing over a fictional character or saying, you know what, I prefer if the women in the game that I'm going to play were attractive. The thirst and obsession over Astarion is a prime example of just that. But if we were to look at the men that like Eve from Stellar Blade, on the other hand, the attitude towards their fascination is a little bit different.
Prepare for trouble!
Make it double!
Because men get called simps, perverts, sexist, and that they have unrealistic expectations of what a woman should look like if they like characters like Eve. Okay, now that most people have called me a pygmy, disliked this video and clicked off, let me explain what I mean to the mature adults that are still watching this. So, when I was younger, I could not understand the reason why this happened so much to guys but not to us, until I got older and I saw that stupid "the male gaze" argument being brought up anytime a guy said that he would prefer if the female characters he is going to be playing as or spend hours interacting with in a game were a bit more attractive. And I guess that's shocking and controversial, because who would have thought that people of both genders like looking at attractive people? In other earth-shattering news for today, don't miss: water is still wet, and in a shocking turn of events, the sky is in fact still blue. But let's get back to the argument itself, because what it suggests is that because video games were predominantly made by men, the female characters were made through the prism of the male gaze, aka what they found and thought of as attractive, and many women came forward and called men out for that. However, this was still baffling to me because as a woman myself, it was plain to see that the women complaining about that are being complete hypocrites. Any honest woman will admit to that, because what woman can honestly, hand to heart, say that we haven't been doing the exact same thing to men in mediums that were written and produced through the female gaze instead?
Huh? Suddenly it reeks of hypocrisy in here.
The women complaining about the male gaze seem to be forgetting that there are mediums of entertainment that are dominated by women and thus viewed through the female perspective and what would be more appealing to us and not to guys. Because it turns out that we too like seeing and reading about attractive men in the things we consume as well. Which is why romantic comedies are a thing, which is why A Court of Thorns and Roses is selling like hotcakes, why Love and Deep Space made 40 million in a month, and why fanfiction is still alive and well, with AO3 reaching its exorbitant server upkeep goal each and every year without a fail. So, with the exception of Love and Deep Space, which is a video game, most of the other mediums that I just mentioned, but especially books and fanfiction, are all made predominantly by women for women. And we have been romanticizing and sexualizing men and even male video game characters on there for years. But the big difference here is that I have never seen or heard of a guy complaining about the type of guys that we create or choose to idolize in said mediums, or saying that those guys are setting unrealistic standards for them, for example. And the few men that have complained were never listened to by any industry, so no changes have been made to how us women are allowed to portray or not portray a guy in books, in movies, in games, in series, and so on. What is more, I have never had a guy make fun of me for saying that I found a fictional character attractive. Whereas I've seen many of women, especially on social media, ridiculing a guy because he said he found Eve attractive. And maybe it's because I'm not from the US, but I cannot understand how a woman would look at the attractive female video game characters and have the gall to complain about it when we have been doing the exact same thing to men in our mediums of entertainment as well. So at the end of the day, whether we like it or not, gaming is a predominantly male space that we have only recently joined. So it is only natural that men have been doing things their way, and of course they do not like us or anyone coming in and demanding that they do things our way from now on, just like we wouldn't want them to come into our spaces and demand we do things their way too. And while I personally do not understand this issue, it's true that some women might not like this aspect of video games now that they're starting to play and get more into them. But is the fact that men like attractive women, first of all, a surprise? And second of all, is it really a problem here? Because let's not pretend like we haven't been doing the exact same thing to them, and that if a guy was to open fanfiction or AO3 right now and look at the stories and male characters that we have been creating through our female gaze, that they wouldn't feel objectified and maybe even weirded out by some of the absolutely downright insane fanfiction that exists out there. Not to mention that they would see right through some women's hypocritical stance on this issue. The hypocrisy here is twofold, because the same people that are telling us that this is not what a woman looks like, because this is a character based on stereotypes about women and thus misogynistic, are the same people that are telling us that this is what a woman looks like and this is what a woman acts like, even when this behavior is based on stereotypes about how women are supposed to act. But in this case, for some reason, this is not misogynistic at all.
Day 6 being a girl, and today I'm in nature. Trees, I love them. Water, lakes, I love them. Heels, they're my hiking heels. I love them. Okay, come on. Meadows, love them. Love ya.
Did you see that sucker over there?
What?
Did you see that?
Bro, what are you talking
get
about,
out of
man?
Did you see that?
Bro, I'm out, man.
There's a giant-
That nigga's
Oh my
tripping.
god. Never again. Get me out of here.
Which is why no one takes people from this movement seriously, because they're not being serious themselves. They will have this set of rules that they will tell developers that you cannot have a woman be this, this, and this, and that because it's misogynistic and it promotes stereotypes about women that are not true.
That's better and fairer. Now, it will take a little bit of time to change the system, so we're also making changes immediately to benefit you.
But then, when a guy goes to the park claiming that it's day whatever of girlhood, wearing makeup and high heels, screaming when he sees bugs, and acting in every single stereotypical way of what a woman is supposed to look and act like, then those rules don't apply anymore. That's not condescending, that's not misogynistic. Instead, it is just a real woman at the park playing and just experiencing girlhood and acting all crazy and like a silly little goose in the park, then of course that's not misogynistic at all. That's obviously how all women act. So in trying to prevent men from representing us in an attractive manner in video games, we forgot to realize that we are also having a detrimental effect on how as women view ourselves. Which brings me to the second part of this video. More and more women are joining in both the development as well as the fan bases of many games. And while one would expect that this would help with how women are represented, it has done the exact opposite. Let's take women's personalities first. If, for example, a development studio today wants to create a strong woman in a game, she first of all looks manly, she looks nothing like a woman, and she talks and acts like a macho guy, which, in my opinion, is much more offensive because it's like they are telling us that if you want to be strong, you can't achieve that as a woman, and that you have to be more like a guy in order to do that. Because first, they tell us to hate men for their toxic masculinity, which according to them is defined as men who are physically strong, emotionally callous, behaviorally aggressive, also men that are not able to show emotions or accept help, and men that always just try to obtain power and status. And then tell us to act like that if we want to be strong, for example, which feels more condescending than empowering. Then there is the issue of insecurities. Body-related insecurities have led to the depiction of women resembling something that looks more like a blank, empty, Play-Doh-looking vessel of a so-called woman than what an actual woman looks or even acts like. Personally, I do not understand why a set of pixels would upset anyone to the point where they would have body image issues about that. But at the same time, I understand that there are a lot of people out there that are more emotional and thus more susceptible to having their self-image impacted by such a thing. And I understand that because it is true that we cannot help how certain things will affect us. But what we can control is how we choose to react to those things. Men, for example, have never complained about us portraying them as mostly tall, handsome, and muscular men in almost everything we consume. Instead, they will either ignore that, or they will decide to go to the gym and try to look like the character they saw and thought that he was cool because of his appearance. For example, while I was playing God of War, I specifically asked my brother and all my male friends about their opinion on Kratos being this strong, buff guy who has his abs out most of the time, and they all told me something along the lines of, yeah, Kratos is a beast, and that most of them would love to have that physique, and that was it. There are also a lot of guys that started going to the gym because of the game, so they took something potentially offensive or even objectifying and chose to take this and make it a net positive for them. So why can't we do the same? Why can't we either A, ignore this because of course men want to look at attractive women just like we like to look at attractive men, or B, use this to better ourselves? You hate how fit a female character in a game is? No one is stopping you from going to the gym to try and be more like her.
Come with me if you want to lift.
Why choose to view her in a negative light and not try to use her as fuel to better yourself? And frankly, this is my biggest issue with this movement, because this makes us look more like the stereotypical mean girls of high school that are just being mean to each other, cause drama, and hate on the prettier girls in school just for being prettier. So if anything, our holier-than-thou but deeply hypocritical stance on this issue only reinforces the stereotypes that already exist about us and that we have fought so hard to overcome over the years. But of course, in typical third and fourth wave feminism fashion, this pointless hill they have chosen to die on is destroying any real progress made for women in video games so far.
So, I am going to spend the next minute screaming, because that is what is going on in here.
And I'm not saying that there are not problematic people in the gaming world, just like there are always problematic people in all aspects of life. I have personally met both toxic and weird men that really acted in the typical way you would expect when they realized that they were playing with a woman online, but I have also met very sweet and kind men as well in online games, so it's not like this was a big problem. Of course there are toxic aspects in gaming, but it's not that big of a deal. Essentially, these people came barging in and demanding men change aspects of their favorite hobby, and of course there was some pushback, and of course it backfired, as this movement is partially responsible for the current state of the gaming industry. And another thing that not a lot of people seem to be bringing up is that this movement is also responsible for making young girls have an identity crisis, because they have been told that they have to act like men in order to be strong, in order to be cool, in order to be adventurous, and so on. I think that the people in this movement have forgotten the golden rule of respect, which is that you cannot demand respect, you can only earn it. If you demand it, you have already lost it. So to me, this movement has started to look like a bunch of people that do not want to put any effort into improving and bettering themselves. So instead, they came together and thought, you know what, I'm just going to try and change what people traditionally view as attractive, so that I won't have to put any actual effort in changing, and I'm just going to change what the world thinks about me instead of me trying to improve myself. But I concede that we cannot choose how this will affect some of us. But again, we can choose how we react to it. Being judgmental about something we too are guilty of is definitely not one of the healthy ways in which we should react, however. And lastly, we have to understand that we are still somewhat new to this space, and even if this was a genuine problem, and even if some women wanted to see this change in video games, this is definitely not the way to go about it, because barging in and destroying whatever they do not like or agree with will of course make men think that we all came in and destroyed their hobby, just like we would do the same if they suddenly started demanding we change things about the male characters in mediums of entertainment that are predominantly made for women by women. This only further divides us, and with the current state of the gaming industry, our only hope is to stick together and make video games just games again. A medium through which one tells a compelling story with good gameplay mechanics, and not just a vessel through which one panders, virtue signals, or force feeds their own political views onto unsuspecting gamers who just wanted a bit of escapism.
So, I'm non-binary.